This man is helping to preserve biodiversity, tropical forests, and himself. This chair was made by hand in a village in Honduras. It would be nice to say that this is the chair that is saving rainforests, but it's not. As we've all learned by now, there are no easy fixes, no one solution to environmental problems. But this GreenWood chair, elegant in its simplicity, does have a story to tell.
I think it's well known now that a great deal of the biodiversity on this earth, at least outside of the oceans, is maintained in tropical forests. And tremendous numbers of medicines and everything else come out of these forests and potentially could in the future, as well as many, many other products. At the same time, these are the areas in the world where many of our poorest people live. What can be done? The solution is not going to be real simple. It's not going to be just one easy trick.
Gradually, I began to see around the world what happened when you got things wrong. You end up often with no forests, or with no jobs, or with no production. The forests get sometimes degraded to the point of being unproductive, or you end up with a conflictive social situation battling between so-called conservation interests and so-called production interests, where one side or the other is likely to lose, often both. And what has really enraged me in many parts of the world is seeing regions where there used to be people with forests and viable forms of making a living by one means or another, including harvesting from the forest, including hunting, including agriculture. And after a while, they end up with nothing, neither agriculture, nor hunting, nor forests, nor livelihoods. This is the worst-case scenario, which is becoming increasingly common in many parts of the world, and it's unnecessary.
The Atlantic region of Honduras in Central America. There are about 3 million hectares of broadleaf hardwood forests here, as well as land used for livestock and huge plantations of oil palms, bananas, and pineapples grown for export. Much of this is land owned by multinational companies. Even though rich in natural resources, Honduras is one of the poorest countries in the Western Hemisphere.
There's a lot of money involved, population pressures throughout Latin America, people migrating from the cities where they can't find work to rural and forested areas where they don't have a lot of farming experience. Leads to a lot of deforestation, clearing and burning, and a kind of successive process of forest elimination.
People have a desperate need for land. They have a desperate need for land that produces, because the land that they have had in the past has now been largely destroyed. People have a tremendous need to have enough food, just even the very, very basic necessities of human life. If they can't get those in ways that maintain the biodiversity, they're going to destroy the biodiversity. And in fact, my own feeling is that they are very justified in doing so. If we're interested in maintaining biodiversity, we've got to find ways that that biodiversity can be maintained while at the same time the people's needs are taken care of.
Deep in the Honduran countryside, along a gravel road full of potholes, 50 kilometers from the nearest town, is a small village. Surrounded by forest, the community is spread out over a large valley. There's no electricity and few cars. The nearest phone is 3 hours away. El Carbón is an indigenous Pech community of about 120 families, and they have lived in this valley, mainly by subsistence agriculture, for centuries. The Pech have control over their own land, including the forest. There aren't a lot of choices for work, so logging has provided much-needed income. But now, an alternative has been found. Using a draw knife and a shaving horse to hold the wood, 23-year-old Jose Pablo Cordova is making legs for a chair. Jose was born and grew up in El Carbón. At 18, he began learning this new skill, and it will make his life different from generations before him. Now, others in the village are also making chairs. The design is from Appalachia, but the materials are local. These miniatures are for souvenirs and for marketing. How did the design from Appalachia find its way into a Honduran village? Curtis Buchanan is a craftsman from Tennessee.
I had just read an article by Michael Fortune in a newsletter of an environmental group that belonged to, and he was talking about the project he had been involved in the Yucatan, chairmaking, and some of the problems that he had encountered had mostly to do with casework and the way that you would put together a table with rectangular joints and drywood and glue, cabinet maker's joints. As I was reading it, I said, well, I don't have those kind of problems with my chairs. We use GreenWood, and I wonder if they would work down there. We looked at various areas that the Canadian International Development Agency and the Honduras Forestry Department were working in a project called PDBL. And they gave us one of their jeeps and one of their interpreters, and we went to these different sites and talked to the villagers and looked around. And we came up here to El Carbón, which was the site furthest away from everything, and the only site with indigenous peoples in it. And we got a different feel here. There was seemed to be more of a community effort that we didn't feel in some of the other areas, and we needed every advantage that we could get. And we thought if we had a place where there was a community coming together, doing things together, then we had a much better chance.
The first chairmaking class was 5 years ago, and Curtis has been coming to Honduras several times a year ever since. Jose Pablo and Alexis were two of his first students. Over the years, their skills and independence have increased, so that now they are able to earn a living making chairs. Jose Pablo puts the finishing touches on his chair rungs. His pole lathe is the same basic design that produced Chippendale furniture. A wrench checks the diameter. With only $50 worth of hand tools, Jose Pablo is earning a living.
I really like the work, and it provides a steady job. The wood comes from our own land, so we don't spend anything on materials to make a chair. I knew that once the chair was made, people would like it and would buy it.
Word has spread. La Ceiba, Honduras, a town of 100,000, is the site of a master chair-making class. Some of the first students from El Carbón are learning how to apply new skills to Windsor chairs and other complex designs, trying out different kinds of local wood. This is wood that doesn't have a high commercial value. It shows how much can be done with just one tree. The idea of leaving more trees standing than cut now makes both economic and environmental sense.
And with the chairs here, we've really lucked out because the woods they're using, a lot of them aren't even major canopy trees. Like the forest that I'm working in might have, I'm not sure, 120 different species. And there's only a few that have much value. And of course, the queen of the forest is mahogany. And once the mahogany is removed from that forest, then the forest really doesn't have much value economically to the campesino or anybody else. And so the scenario sort of is to cut the forest and to burn it to fertilize the ground so they can grow, a few crops. And of course, what we're trying to do, and a lot of other people, is to make the forest too valuable to burn.
One way of doing that is to promote the use of alternative or lesser-known species. Curtis and Michael Fortune belong to an international organization of woodworkers whose aim is to spread the word about sustainable forest management and the availability of lesser-known species. Scott Landis is the founder.
The market has for so long been concentrated on a relative handful of species. In a place like Honduras, for example, the prime export species are and have been mahogany and cedar. But that's just a small fraction of the literally hundreds of species that grow in those forests. So the idea of using lesser-known species is to, number one, take the heat, the pressure off of those over-harvested, severely over-harvested woods, and to create more value for the whole forest.
Lesser-known species, a global idea with applications to the most specific of local places.
This chair right here has two different types in it. It's got cola de pava, which is the wood that we originally started using. And then the fellows here that have been making them have been trying out other species. And this one right here is yema de huevo, this is the first time that I've seen it. Which is just fine. I don't have to see it, as long as it's working for them and they're finding new species. That's just great.
In El Carbón, change is working for Jose Pablo.
We learned that we don't have to clear-cut the forest. Instead, we can cut a tree that no one else wants. It's different from the traditional wood that people cut. It's alternative wood, and we've chosen it knowing exactly how many chairs we're going to make from each tree. We also know that not just one person will benefit, but rather that all of us in the community will benefit.
This is capulín negro, and many call it a weed tree. It's common all over Central America. Once regarded as a nuisance, it turns out that its bark is soft, flexible, and strong, ideal to weave for the seats of chairs.
There's different ideas about protecting forest, rainforest, temperate forest, boreal forest, whatever. And one, of course, is parks and preserves and biospheres and all that. And those are great ideas, and those are needed. But you can't have the area around those places denuded. And so those areas become hopefully will become multi-use areas where the people can live and can make a living off the forest by maintaining the forest. And in order for them to do that, the forest has to give them some sort of economic benefit.
Jose Pablo's chair is taking shape. The bark quickly transformed into a seat.
The project either sinks or swims according to the local people, which is really the way it should be, and it's been carried on because it does work. It is the appropriate technology, and they can make money off of it. It is better work and better money than they can make by burning the forest and subsistence agriculture. And so naturally they're going to take to it, and it grows naturally. They see that these guys are making some money off of this. The school sees that it's working. They use it as part of their curriculum. There's chairs all over the place. You can drive by a little pulperia, a little store where they're sitting out front playing cards, and they're sitting in chairs made by my students. You know, it's just wonderful.
The project makes sense to the people of El Carbón. Their role in shaping it is an important part of its success. Unlike so many other places in the south and in the north, this one is on a new path.
Basically, what we've begun to realize over the last 5 or 10 years is that if you take the different factors that are absolutely necessary for, say, a development process to maintain itself over a long period of time, these factors would be such things as people being able to work together in organizations, people being able to make an income and have a little bit of income, people being able to, people having self-confidence, believing that they're capable of carrying on this process, people having a certain amount of knowledge, technical knowledge, and so forth. If we look at these factors, it's interesting that they coincide perfectly with what social scientists for years have identified as the sources of power within a society. You know, education, money, self-respect, and self-confidence. They're exactly the same factors. So if we want sustainable development, if we want development to continue year after year, we have to be willing to allow people to become empowered.
People need work, tomorrow as well as today. So the forest must last if it is to continue supporting both biodiversity and human life. These Honduran women are learning how to make chairs. Alexis, one of Curtis's students, is teaching them. Traditionally, their life choices have been limited. Now, there are options for the future. With skills come the possibility of work, income, and independence. People and communities actively creating sustainable solutions for themselves and, in the end, for all of us. Jobs and trees.